Hey guys, welcome to Amity Tracks and welcome to Kinks Week or weeks, however long this takes. Super excited about this. The Kinks have always been one of my favorite bands. You do a channel like this for a while, and we've been doing this for a little while now, I guess. But you don't want to hit like all your favorite bands in the beginning. You want to save some. So there are still some great bands that I truly love that we haven't covered yet. In detail because you kind of want to spread them out a little bit. I don't know. I was in the mood, felt it was finally time. Let's do the Kinks. Ray Davis. Now, I guess let's talk about the name from the beginning here. You at least us Americans would look at their last name Ray and Dave and say Davies, but from what I understand, they pronounce it Davis, so that's what we're gonna say. Anyway, Ray Davis, one of the great songwriters in all of rock and roll history. I mean, he could do it all. We start off writing these like sort of proto, garage classics. You really got me now, all day and all the night. Then he could, slip into British music hall and write these shimmering pop songs. He could do concept albums and rock operas, and then slide right into just awesome arena rock, in the late 70s and early 80s. That he could do it all. He could do it all. I think their secret weapon, though, Ray Davis is kind of obvious. His brother Dave Davis. One of the great underrated guitar players, great singer. Yeah, I kind of when I talk about the Who sometimes, you got Roger Daltrey, and then uh, but I kind of prefer Pete Townsend's voice a lot of the time. Sometimes the same thing here. Ray sings most of the songs, but I really dig Dave's voice. I love his vocals. Guitar playing, of course, and a really good songwriter in his own right. I wrote some great songs. And I don't know. You always kind of look at sort of like George Harrison or John Entwistle and the Who. You know, Dave was always able to get maybe a couple of songs on a good Kinks album. You know, amongst Ray's classics here, but yeah, and the Davis brothers. Set the standard for feuding siblings in a rock band, right? For Oasis and whoever else. Sometimes leading to drunken fisticuffs on the stage. Yeah, and the Kinks, I think, you're looking at these big British invasion bands. The big ones. The Kinks were always kind of the quirkiest. One of the, I don't know, biggest cult bands ever in some ways. And part of it is I think they were the most British, of all of these British invasion bands. Although the Kinks did too, sort of work in some, American genres as well, as you'll see. So, yeah, we're gonna get into the Kinks here. The Kinks are also kind of interesting, and we're gonna be doing, ranking the albums this episode and the next episode. They're interesting because you can really sort of divide up what I divide up into six distinct periods. You got that beginning period or that garage period where they're doing a lot of covers, but also writing some classic garage kind of type songs. But still, Ray Davis's songwriting, his intricate songwriting is starting to creep in a little bit. Then you got kind of this golden era, about 66 to 69. With features a lot of the albums where like most people hold up as sort of masterpieces. Interestingly, this was also the period when the Kinks were banned from touring in the United States. I try to remember I've heard different versions of the story of why. Some sort of dispute with the musicians union or something. So the Kinks were banned from touring in that crucial late 60s period in the US. It's kind of interesting. Then they kind of hit this sort of Americana groove, from like 1970 to 72. And then a very controversial, what we'll call the theatrical period, where Ray is trying to write these concept pieces that a lot of people don't like. See how much I like them. That's about 73 to 75. And then the Arista period, where kind of the arena rock era, 77 to about 84, which I have a really fond, that's a soft spot for me. I love that era. That was the era that I got in on, and in the early 80s when I first discovered the Kinks. And it was the hit Come Dancing, right? And when I heard that song, I didn't know the whole history. I was still pretty young in the early 80s. So I didn't know that whole history. I thought there was just this new great band, and I love that song. And then I start to explore them. It's like, oh, yeah, this whole history, right? And so I've got a real soft spot. And I think genuinely great period, that Arista period. And then kind of the end, 86 to 95 or so, where they sort of taper off. And then there we go. So how this is going to work, this episode, we're going to do records 20 in the ranking 25 through 11. Now, how do I get to 25? I am including Percy, the soundtrack they did, and I'm including the Great Lost Kinks album. We'll talk about that when we get to it. Episode 2 will be the top 10, my top 10 Kinks albums. And then I think we'll have a third episode where we talk about live albums, comps, which actually, with the Kinks, there's some great Kinks compilations that we'll get into a little bit. And I want to address the solo careers of the Davis brothers, so we'll kind of hit that in the third episode. But all right, let's do it. Let's just get started. So coming at number 25, should be no surprise. This album is disliked even by Kinks fanatics. And it's unfortunately the last full studio record they did, which was Phobia. Now, I've got a handful of these on CD that we're going to talk about at the end, because I'm not going to go spend money on this for vinyl. But rest assured, most of these we'll have on vinyl. But yeah, Phobia from 1993. Terrible. I mean, this is a bad album. And unfortunately, you're into the 90s, into the CD era where bands think they need to fill all that space. So this is not only bad, but it's long. It's 16 long tracks, and it just drags. Crazy. There's one, every Kinks album, there's at least one gem, and the gem on here is Scattered, but it's the last song of the album, So if you're listening to it all the way through, you might not have made it to that last track. But Scattered is great, but that's like the only song on here I like. I mean, I think they were kind of out of gas, definitely, by Phobia. Number 24, going back to 1974 with Preservation Act 2. So the deal is, and you're going to be seeing this one real soon, Preservation Act 1. So these two together, I'll just talk about them sort of together and then just mention this when we hit it. But this was a concept piece. This is kind of during that theatrical period. I don't even remember the story. It doesn't matter because it makes no sense the way this was presented. Somehow it got separated into these two records, and as I'm ranking number 24, the second one, because this was a double album. This has all the narration in between songs, and then some songs, and then this came out before, and this was just some songs, and so it got all mixed up. So the whole narration makes no sense, and yeah, Ray Davis is especially here, kind of some of his corny worst. Um, I mean, but even here, "Mirror of Love" is a good song. I like that one. But yeah, so there you go. Preservation Act 2. All right, coming at number 23. Got some vinyl here. We've got 1986. Think Visual. Horrible album art. Not much better music on the record. Very 80s. This was their debut on MCA. It kind of came right after that, what I think is a great Arista period. But this just sort of sounds very, yeah, I don't know, very 80s in all the wrong ways. And I do love the 80s, but yeah. Now, again, there is a gem on here. Lost and Found is a gorgeous song. I mean, I love that song, but the rest of this doesn't do much for me. All right. Coming in number 22 is Preservation Act 1. So I already kind of told you about Preservation. So the first one, a little bit better because it's all songs. a lot of double album. Yeah, there's some good stuff on here. Sitting in the Midday Sun is great because it's sort of reminiscent of some of that late '60s vibe. Yeah, it's Sweet Lady Genevieve is nice. Yeah, it's not terrible, but it just doesn't. The whole concept doesn't really come together. All right, coming at number 21 is where we are. Yeah, gotta make sure the video or a while back there was some video where I skipped like two. Anyway, so make sure I'm not skipping any. So yeah, 21, 1989's UK Jive. So their other MCA record. This one you see often sort of the very bottom of some lists. I don't have it at the very bottom. I think it's not all bad. I think there's some gems in here. Looney Balloon is a gorgeous song. That is such a great song. Um, the single that they promoted off of here, "How Do I Get Close?" That's a pretty good rocker. I like that. Oh, yeah, it's not all bad, but it's not all that great either. Okay, so coming in at number 20, this is the last CD. It's all vinyl after this one, but I do have that 1971 soundtrack to the film Percy. Never seen the film, but yeah, it's a soundtrack. But it's all Kinks, so I kind of most people consider it a Kinks album. So but it's in some other ways it does play like a soundtrack. I mean, there's just kind of some instrumental passages here that you don't normally get on a Kinks album. Like there's a instrumental version of Lola on there. Some of the other instrumentals are all right. There's some drop dead gorgeous like acoustic kind of folk, just beautiful wistful songs on here though. God's Children is great. The Way Love Used to Be is gorgeous. So yeah, there are some keepers on here, but again, it is a soundtrack. Yeah, I mean, it kind of works that way. Not like a totally full Kinks record, even though it is all the Kinks. You know, Kinks are doing all the music. Number 19, going all the way back to the beginning. Now, if you saw our previous video, we talked about this record, and it didn't fare that well when we put it head to head with the debut from some of the other big British invasion bands, the Stones debut, the Who's debut, and the Beatles debut. So yeah, 1964, Kinks debut. Kinks. Now, it's got one absolute stunning, one of the greatest songs ever in rock history on here. You Really Got Me, right? The famous story of Dave taking a knife to the amplifier and kind of cutting the paper in there to get some distortion in there. That's a cool story. Now there's some dispute over whether Jimmy Page was brought in as a session guy at the time to play the solo. Now, from what I have read, that is Dave on the solo, but Jimmy Page is playing some rhythm, kind of the rhythm guitar part that Ray would normally play because Ray just wanted to focus on the vocals. I don't know. It's kind of interesting, but yeah, I mean, you really got me. You know, it's sort of the godfather of garage rock, right? I mean, 1964. You got to remember that year. Stop Your Sobbing is the other I think keeper on here, but the rest of this is fairly generic covers at this point, and even some of the other original songs don't don't really stand up to Ray's later work. So, all right, put that there. Okay, so number 18, number 18. Now this is one that part of that theatrical period that is not held in really high esteem. But I actually kind of like this record. Now, this also is in the running for terrible album art. It's a horrible cover, but "Schoolboys in Disgrace" um, from 1975. Now, this was the last record from that theatrical period. Oh, there they are. Their schoolboy uniforms, right? So that last in that kind of theatrical period before they signed on to Arista and really changed their sound again. Supposedly some sort of follow up to the preservation work, kind of following one of those characters. I don't follow the story all that closely, Uh, what I will say is, after this string of very kind of theatrical, stagey, uh, really affected writing from Ray, he does get back to some more gritty rock and roll on here. This, even though there's supposed to be some story here, this works pretty well as just kind of a straight up rock record. Finally, Dave is allowed to kind of cut loose on guitar again, which he hadn't in a while, at least over over a full record. There's some good songs on here. The Hard Way is a great rocker. No More Looking Back, I think, is really kind of wistful, nice tune. And I do, and obviously, even if I'm not following the story here, there is a kind of this overall theme of school, school days, so it's kind of cool. I don't think that's that bad. Now, number 17. This might be a hot take. I know 17 isn't real high on the list, but again, I've seen other rankings, and this is often at the bottom or near the bottom. I obviously don't think so. I actually kind of like this record. I Yeah, a soap opera. The last of the from this theatrical period in the mid 70s. This was 74. Um, yeah, I don't mind this at all. Even actually, kind of like it. So yeah, I don't know. A lot of people don't. A lot of people don't. Oh, probably the most theatrical of all these records from this period. This story is kind of the classic sort of changing place, trading places story of this big rock star changing places with this sort of Joe Schmo, this average Schmo, and they switch places, and you know that's kind of the story behind it. And I don't know, I just I kind of like it. Yeah, I can actually kind of follow the story here, which is cool, which is not true of a lot of these other records from this era. And ordinary people, everybody's a star. Uh, Facing a crowd, can't stop the music. I think those are pretty good Kinks songs, actually. So yeah, I think there's good songs on here. It's interesting. Hell, I don't even mind Ducks on the Wall. All right, so there we go. Number 16. We've gotten all the way up here to 16 before I've hit even what I consider the worst of the Arista period. I love these Arista records. And this was the last one in that run, on the Arista label. The story goes that was it Clive Davis, I think, the guy who ran Arista at the time, basically pulled Ray into some meeting and said, "All right, we're signing you. We're gonna, fund your records. No more of that theatrical crap. We want rock and roll." And Ray delivered. There's six, I think, six studio records from this Arista run. I really like them all. I really do. And like I told you, this was when I got on board. And I just love telling the story and returning to it because, unlike the Stones or the Beatles or whatever, when I first learned about them, I already kind of knew they were these legendary acts, and I was supposed to love them and all that. That's not what happened with the Kinks. I saw them on MTV. I just thought they were just a regular contemporary band. Fell in love with their music from this time, and then discovered this whole rich history. Right? I just It says something about how good the Kinks were, how long they were good. Right? Anyway, in my 16th slot, I have 19. Was it 84? Yeah, 1984. Word of Mouth. I do think overall the weakest of this Arista period, but a couple of highlights on here are a couple of their best songs from this entire period. I love Do It Again. I think that is a killer rocker. It's witty. It's got great lyrics. It's got this real spiky, just great, several great riffs laid on top of each other. I love Do It Again. And then Living on a Thin Line from Dave. a Dave Davis song. I think that may be Dave's best Kinks song of any era. I think "Living on a Thin Line" is a masterpiece. Kind of wistfully looking back at sort of England of old, and that England isn't where it used to be. I just, a lot of the stuff, a lot of the territory that Ray mined, but it's just an incredible song. Now, unfortunately, the rest of this record I don't think holds up to those songs all that much. It's not all bad. "Summer's Gone" is nice. What else is? Yeah. Anyway, so the least of the Arista, but with a couple of just real standouts. All right. Let's see. Well, number 15. Let's stick with the Arista period. So this one also I don't think is one of the strongest ones, but this is number 15, 1981's "Give the People What They Want." Okay, sort of a cynical sentiment from Ray. So they want these kind of arena rock hits. Well, here you go. This is there's some interesting stuff on this one. "Around the Dial" opens up really strong. That's pretty cool. That rocks really hard. Um, "Better Things" I think is a great pop song. That's fantastic. "Art Lover," uh, it's kind of cringy if you look at those lyrics. Yeah. Now, and we'll kind of address this with a later record, but probably tomorrow in the top 10. But you know, Ray Ray Davis does like to inhabit characters, kind of like Randy Newman, right? So he will often write through the perspective of some characters who might be kind of shady and not not be that admirable. Let's just hope that that's the perspective he's doing on "Art Lover." Um, "Destroyer." "Destroyer" is so witty. It's a great rock song where he basically takes the music from "All Day and All the Night," but updates it and then references Lola. It's just a really witty way to sort of reference yourself, and it's a great rocker in its own right. So it's interesting stuff on here. All right, number 14. Well, number 14 and 13 we can kind of talk about together. So that early period, we already talked about the debut not being that great. Now, I do think Ray really does take a pretty big step forward on the second and the third records, which is what I have here. I've got the second record, 1965, "Kinda Kinks," here at number 14, and then at number 13, I got the third record, "The Kink Controversy," from also 1965. Released both of these in 65. Kind of talk about them together. But yeah, I do think now there's still some, not that great covers, and there's some filler. But unlike the debut that only had two keepers, like original songs, you start to have maybe four keepers or so on each of these. So when you're looking at "Kinda Kinks" here, "Nothing in the World Can Stop Me Worrying About That Girl" is a great acoustic tune. Now that was used, you know, I was using Rushmore, right? Wes Anderson song. Wes Anderson loved using some Kinks on some of his soundtracks. "Tired of Waiting for You" is great. "Come On Now" is a good rocker. "Something Better Beginning" is a beautiful song. So Ray's really sort of stretching out, I think, from the debut, his writing here, and just continues on here, right? Now this one's got "Till the End of the Day," one of his great rockers. "Where Have All the Good Times Gone?" It's awesome. Yeah, but even now on this one, even some of the covers are starting to really kind of rock, and the Kinks are starting to put their stamp on it. Opening up with "Milk Cow Blues," which is it's a really, I'm pretty sure that's a cover. I would assume, yes, that is a cover, and that rocks. That rocks. And so yeah, they're really sort of getting their footing here. All right. All right. Two more. 2 more in this episode, and we'll wrap it up. Top 10 on the next episode. Number 12, we're going back to the Arista period again. 1979's Low Budget. Low Budget. Now this one actually was a pretty big hit in the U.S. It kind of sounds the most American. I mean, it really was American rocker. And what's kind of cool here is Ray really does sort of capture some of the tension, the unease in the late '70s. Like a lot of these songs are kind of topical. Like Low Budget. That sort of out of control inflation. People were really kind of struggling. A gallon of gas. We have the energy crisis in the late '70s here, and so it's kind of cool that Ray sort of captures some of that angst, in the states here, and some great rockers here. "Catch Me Now I'm Falling" is a great song. "Wish I Could Fly Like Superman." I love. It was really interesting. "Catch Me Now I'm Falling." He kind of references Captain America, and like Captain America is sort of not able to save the day, and then he's got "Wish I Could Fly Like Superman" on here. It's kind of interesting. Multiple songs referencing superheroes, but yeah, "Catch Me Now I'm Falling" and "Superman" were great singles. Superman especially actually has kind of that disco groove. Where a lot of rock bands in the late '70s are trying to at least have some disco rhythms. Kind of works on that one. I love that song. "Wish I Could Fly Like Superman." I think "Moving Pictures" is sort of the hidden gem on here. "Moving Pictures" is a great song too. Okay, last one we're going to talk about today in the number 11 slot. I do have. I referenced this at the beginning. The Great Lost Kinks album from 1973. Now, some people may question putting this on an official ranking. So, the story behind this record, because what this is a bunch of kind of unreleased tracks, really from the late '60s period, kind of the Village Green Preservation Society era, and considered a real peak, right? And so the story was, the Kinks were sort of changing labels, and but Reprise felt that the Kinks owed them one more record. So Reprise basically put this together and released it, with these songs in the vaults without the Kinks' permission. Like Ray Davis didn't even know this was out until it was out. Like it was on the shelves. He's like, "What the hell is this?" Right? And I wasn't too pleased about it. And so there was some legal action. And so what ended up happening is Reprise ended up deleting this from the catalog. So they stopped reissuing it. Now, there were a lot of copies that were put out there, so you can find one like I did if you really look hard. And honestly, on a lot of the CD reissues, almost all these tracks are on as bonus tracks. So the next episode I'm gonna talk about the CD reissues because those have been really good with the bonus material. But anyway, so yeah, this has just some great songs from the late '60s. Like I said, a really great handful of tunes from the Village Green Preservation Society sessions. I believe "Groovy Movies," was it "Misty Water." Uh, what else from those sessions? I think "Lavender Hill," "Rosemary Rose." Not positive exactly which ones, but but it also has just some great stuff. Like "I'm Not Like Everybody Else," which was a fantastic B-side. "This Man He Weeps Tonight," which is a killer Dave Davis song from that era. So yeah, I mean, just a really great listen and collection, you know, from that late '60s peak. So, well, there we are, guys. What do you guys think so far? Let's talk in the comments. So far, you like my rankings? Am I totally off? If you're a big Kinks fan, you kind of know what's left. So, the next episode, we're gonna do my top 10 Kinks albums. All right. Well, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you have enjoyed so far our review of the Kinks, and we're going to keep going next couple episodes. So please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Really helps us out. Hit the bell for notifications, like the videos, share the videos, all that stuff. And we'll see you next time on Amity Tracks, where we continue with the top 10 Kinks albums.